So good afternoon, good morning, everybody. Thank you again for taking the time to join us. This is Jack or KJ. I'm the Director of Product Marketing at SafeBreach. Uh, I just wanted to remind everyone that this webinar is being recorded, and the recording of this webinar will be shared after the webinar is complete. You should to all attendees and registrants. At any given point of time, if you do have any questions about the content, please do send it to us via the Q&A functionality that's available in your Zoom window. With that being said, let's go ahead and get started. Usually, security operations teams nowadays are finding it increasingly difficult to maintain a hardened security posture against evolving network and cloud threats. And this is probably because threat actors are constantly adapting, they're evolving their techniques to evade traditional perimeter security. And to add to that, the rapid adoption of cloud platforms and SaaS tools has dramatically expanded the attack surface. So even one minor security control misconfiguration anywhere in your network, be it on-prem or cloud, can create a security gap that the attackers can easily exploit. This webinar today is jointly being presented by SafeBreach and Zscaler, and it highlights how our joint integration enables security teams to proactively test their defenses to prevent network and cloud attacks that use malicious domains, URLs, connections with malicious servers, and blacklisted IP addresses. We have two primary speakers today. Our first speaker is Kenny Sigafus from Zscaler. He is the principal product specialist at Zscaler, focused on advanced cloud sandbox and SOC automation. Prior to joining Zscaler, he worked at Palo Alto Networks and has over 15 years of security experience in security operations, incident response, threat and vulnerability protection. Our second speaker today is SafeBreach's own Chief Product Officer, Yotam Ben Ezra. He's been with SafeBreach now for 4 years and has overseen the platform grow into what it is today. He has extensive background in security research and has led research teams at Radware and at Checkpoint. He holds a BSc degree in physics and computer science from King's College London. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm not going to walk through the presentation outline. It's typically what's the challenge, and then we're going to dive into each of the components of the integration, and then how Zscaler and SafeBreach come together to solve the challenges that we've identified. So as you're all aware, modern security operations teams, or modern SOCs, they no longer just have one or two tools. They have more than 10 to 15 tools at least. And it's becoming increasingly difficult to understand which tool is supposed to do what, because nowadays all the tools offer capabilities that are constantly overlapping. And the environment and the attack surface has become so complex that newer things, as soon as they come up, there's always a new tool there or new technology there that is there to address it. Bringing a new technology in or adapting a new technology to your existing environment can create a lot of headaches. And that's why a lot of companies often struggle with security hygiene and posture management, because they don't know which piece goes where and how they can make it fit and make it effectively work so that they can have a hardened security posture. And then all this basically means is it's getting more and more complicated. There's statistics that just don't change. You have, the first stat that you saw in the previous slide was from the ESG survey, where they have at least 10, but modern large enterprises have typically upwards of 70 cybersecurity related tools on their networks, yet they can't seem to stop breaches that emanate from known attacks or known threat vectors. From an IBM survey, that IBM cost of a breach survey, it's been shown that typically 95% of breaches are a result of a known attack. And again, in spite of all of this, 61% of organizations are having difficulty prioritizing their cyber risk efforts, which means that no matter what tools you're bringing to the table, how they work together is more important. And can they actually work to harden your own security posture, not somebody else's, but just your own, is a challenge that needs to be solved. So I'm going to switch over now to Kenny, and he's going to explain how Zscaler, what abilities or what amazing stuff Zscaler brings to the table that can help you solve some of these challenges with cloud networks as well as SaaS deployments. Over to you, Kenny.
Thanks, KJ. Yeah, hey everyone, nice to talk with you here today. As KJ was saying, a lot of the problem that we're seeing in the threat space, if you will, or risk space, if you will, is the fact that there's a lot of the technology to be implemented that can do 90–95% of the protections. And most of what customers are having a hard time with is that overhead of managing it, understanding it, implementing it, and iteratively making it an improved posture over time. Here at Zscaler, we believe that our Zero Trust Exchange, our cloud-delivered, infinitely scalable cloud technology gives you that ability to have that Zero Trust journey. With Zscaler Internet Access, specifically the product that I'm talking about today, we break it down into 4 fundamentals. Pretty simple ones, right? Minimizing the attack surface should be the kind of first and foremost to any business to reducing its risk posture. We do that by giving granular controls within your ZIA tenant to being able to enable the business of the users, but not allow them to go to places that are known malicious, and also be able to inspect and understand suspicious or anomalous activity that we can then steer them away from, block, isolate them, or quarantine. There are many methods of a defense in depth within the ZIA cloud, but minimizing the attack surface is the first priority that we want to talk about. Preventing compromise, this is, of course, maybe arguably number 1 and 2, but the way that we focus on this here is with the infinite scalability of our SSL inspection. With the cloud delivered capability, you're not worried about any type of hardware limitations or geographic limitations to being able to see into the traffic that is coming to your users, where a vast majority of threats today are able to encrypt their traffic from the get-go. So if you're not able to start with being able to see everything, you're already at a hindrance and a loss from being able to block all of these unknown things. Third, eliminate the lateral movement. If you guys know anything about Zscaler, we're pretty aggressive about turning on your head the whole VPN game, and how legacy remote and castle hub and spoke organizations used to allow users to access through VPN capabilities on a complete flat network. Then hopefully they'd be able to do some type of segmentation or some other types of identity controls there to limit their access, but it was a nightmare, right? Well, with our capabilities of access, giving a user only access to a particular application, not access to the entire network or a flat network, and giving them so many scrutinizations around the identity posture, the device posture, and constantly monitoring their risk postures as their activities change over time with things that they're accessing, and reassessing those. We highly limit the ability of lateral movement within the organization or between devices and workloads. And fourth, or finally, stopping data loss. Of course, as we've seen over the past few years, the threat landscape has evolved to really take a beating on organizations with insider threats, paying for inside access to organizations so that they could use that access to steal data, pivot into other organizations, do supply chain attacks. And we believe that this is definitely a very strong fourth pillar of abilities that you have to be able to scrutinize. So we talked about before, reducing the infrastructure, preventing the compromise from like or outside in, so to speak, and eliminating east to west with lateral movement and stopping data losses, basically hoping that your data is labeled, controlled, and also scrutinized on who's accessing it from identity and device posture as well, and where it's going from an inline DLP CASB situation. And I'd be a little remiss if I didn't tell you guys a little bit about the features that came out in our 2022 update. So to kind of layer onto the abilities of being able to scrutinize that in and out traffic or out and in traffic, we have added detections on C2 behavior that has basically allowed us to see over 100 unique botnet detections on a daily basis from an AI model that we've modeled off of the huge amount of telemetry and analytics that we're getting from the cloud Zero Trust Exchange from all the customers, which honestly you could only do from being able to have that data, having scaled the SSL inspection to being able to see all of that traffic in its raw form, and then being able to predictively create these models and iterate on them over time. This has allowed us so many prevention and block capabilities, and I hope you guys would really like to look at some of our collateral at the end to talk more about this. One of the ways that we've done this is we have a really robust research team called ThreatLabZ. If you go over to our website, research.zscaler.com, you'll see some of the blog entries, including this one, where we found a unique iteration on an Agent Tesla rat, either completely net new on the rat or just a newer, unique interpretation of it. The whole build out from that adversary's kill chain is in the blog, and we write about this, and we also post them on Threat Labs on Twitter. But these are the teams that are basically helping us keep up with the trends for adversaries that we're adding the protections in. So when we're working with teams like SafeBreach and looking at some of the new and unique things that are coming from their research teams that are being implemented in their tooling, we're also collaborating and hopefully adding these to your postures, your protections through ZIA, if that is part of your business risk. And of course, we wouldn't be able to go through one of these without talking about a Magic Quadrant. Zscaler is a leader in the Gartner's SSE, or Security Service Edge quadrant. We believe we're very well positioned to continue being a leader and innovator and growing this for the years to come. But it's basically how Gartner's now collapsed all of these different functionalities that you see here, from what used to be just Secure Web Gateway and is now included all of the DLP CASB functionality, Zero Trust Network Access, Firewall as a Service, all of these into one category. But as you can tell, we offer all of these services, and it's all part of our Zero Trust Exchange, either with Zscaler Internet Access, which was what we'll be talking about today, or our VPN replacement functionality with connecting a user to a specific application instead of a flat network with Zscaler Private Access, or our digital experience of being able to help organizations understand how their operations are functioning, and if they're having issues, where to basically go to troubleshoot, whether it's on tier 1 side, SaaS side, or what have you. But all of that functionality is within our Zero Trust Exchange and is now falling under the Gartner SSE Magic Quadrant.
Thank you so much, Kenny. Now, Yotam, SafeBreach's Chief Product Officer, will give you a small brief overview of what is our SafeBreach PaaS platform and talk about the integration before we switch over to the demo. Yotam, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, KJ. So SafeBreach breach and attack simulation basically enables organizations to face those challenges of optimally managing their security tools and answering several questions which are basically around, is the tool that you are running optimized for your environment? How do you know that the tool is actually configured for your business applications in a way which protects you from specific threats that you are concerned about as an organization? And all of that in a very simple way, simply by running the attacks continuously and automatically in a safe way without risking the production network, but in the production environment. And essentially enable testing the efficacy of the security controls and prioritize either from a quantitative standpoint to understand which type of control the organization should focus on, or from an operational standpoint, where we should invest our time in order to optimize configuration. It goes all the way down to whether a specific policy is doing the work that I expect it to do, or whether a threat is protected from a file access policy versus a malicious communication policy, or what mechanism in my security control is actually the one which will protect me when the threat is implemented in my environment. Of course, matrix and reportable matrix is very important as part of this capability, whether it upwards in order to prove out different programs that we've already invested in, or to secure budgets or investment for future programs which are required as part of the changing landscape and the changing environment. One of the things customers are very interested in understanding is what are the likely attacker paths through the network, or in other words, what would an attacker from the outside have to do in order to reach my crown jewels or my important assets? And in many cases, the hidden choke points are not with direct access, but with indirect access. So the attacker predominantly might not be able to access my regulated PCI environment directly, but using a few hops into a less protected environment and then through the network, that is something that can be visualized and very easily seen using the platform. And then, of course, there is the technology part of security operations, but then there is also the process and the people, and the understanding how to improve the maturity of the entire ecosystem is something that can be achieved by running a threat and understanding which layers of the security architecture will trigger and what response they will generate in the environment. So will they generate a log versus a detection versus an alert to the SOC? Will a human see this and respond in time and generate the right activities? And will the right remediation process trigger? Are all questions which our platform enables organizations to answer. So a little bit on how it works. Generally, three main pillars to the capabilities. The first one is the underlying, which is the ability to continuously, automatically, and with a very high scale, attack the environment in a way which doesn't risk the production. Our architecture enables a safe way to run those real attacks in the environment. We offer over 25,000 different attack methods in a playbook, which is continuously updated, both with original research through threat intelligence, various services that our research team consumes, and then we also provide an SLA on US CERT and FBI flash alerts, where there is a new threat alerts as part of this feeds. We will cover that within 24 hours. The entire kill chain of that threat will be in the playbook without any action required from the customer side, and with a click of a button, a new threat like a Log4j or like the Cisco breach, which was one of the recent ones, can be validated in the environment. Second part is the capability to understand the results with various tools to visualize security posture, from a high-level prioritization based on the different parts of the environment to the different security control categories. all the way to a full heat map of the MITRE ATT&CK framework, if that's a program that you're following. We also integrate with vulnerability management in order to help organizations prioritize their patching programs. And so the ability to understand whether compensating controls will reduce priority of a vulnerability in the environment because it will be harder for an attacker to exploit it, or understanding based on the attack data the opportunity that the vulnerability represents for an attacker. Is it accessible from the outside to the organization? Does it enable the attacker access to any critical services or important data? Are all answers that we overlay on top of the scan results and help organizations prioritize it. Lastly, as I mentioned, one of the important things is to understand how the ecosystem works together. And so we correlate and integrate with various security controls and security event management platforms and security orchestration in order to help identify the gaps in the different layers of the process. And one of those capabilities is something that we will show today with the Zscaler, of course. And then lastly, we go back, KJ, please. Lastly, the capability to understand risk and reduce it. So the first part is analytics, which scale down the problem of remediation and basically generate a small number of remediation recommendations for a large number of attacks run in the environment, because some of those remediation actions are similar to each other. And we developed analytics which simply group them together and then help basically scale down the problem. And then lastly, of course, dashboarding capabilities to track progress, to track KPIs, to generate a uniform language in the organization across the progress of the different programs in the security team. A little bit about use cases. There are basically 4 generic categories, which are the leading categories of use cases. The top is security control validation, basically divided into 2 subcategories. The first one is more of an overall organization assessment, where an organization would like to understand their overall security posture, understand where to focus across the different controls, whether it's network security, perimeter segmentation, web filtering, endpoint security, cloud security, data leak prevention, all of those capabilities together, and understand on what areas they will be stronger and what areas should require more focus. That can be done in various aspects, like per business unit or on a monitoring basis to understand environmental drift. The second category is more control specific. So if we are, as an organization, focusing on endpoint security or on email security, we can dive deeper into the realm of that security control specifically and do a very deep test of different techniques in the email attack landscape, or the endpoint attack landscape, or the perimeter, as an example. The other class of use cases, go back please, is a threat assessment, where an organization would like to understand the overall resilience of the organization to a specific threat. So answering the question, how resilient am I to ransomware? Or how resilient am I to the latest US CERT alert or a specific threat actor, which is something that organizations are, in many cases, in a time-sensitive way, are very interested in. Where our SLA comes in 24 hours, they can have a click of a button and understanding of that threat. Then cloud security, whether it's from the threat standpoint or the control standpoint, is also strategic for organizations. Of course, everyone is going to the cloud or to the clouds in a certain way. And then risk-based vulnerability management around prioritizing vulnerabilities. So to summarize on what's different in SafeBreach, could we go to the next slide, please, KJ? Thank you. And so the first thing is the automated mitigation. I mentioned that. So not only we aggregate different findings into a smaller number of recommendations to scale down the problem, we also integrate with security orchestration and various workflow tools in order to automate the mitigation, streamline it into the operational process. Enterprise-ready platform, so the ability to scale attack simulation and testing in an environment of an enterprise is not trivial. The platform has to be smart enough in order to understand where to test what and what systems are relevant for basically what attacks. And that all has to be done in a way which is easy to deploy in the variation and the number of devices which are out there in the enterprise. And so we pride ourselves with that. From a coverage standpoint, we have the largest playbook in the space, and we also cover a very wide array of the environments which are out there across the different operating systems and cloud platforms. And then, last but not least, we are an open platform. We take a very high importance to the security ecosystem. And as we are focused on optimizing and understanding how the security ecosystem performs for a specific organization, we integrate with various parts of that ecosystem to the extent that the results are contextualized and provide the most visibility. And so let's talk about that integration in a little bit more detail, specific for Zscaler. One of the things that is very important to understand is what exactly happened as part of the threats which happen in the organization. So questions are, what logs were generated in my environment? What is the policy that, or the type of alert which triggered? Was the threat identified correctly? Was the threat prevented? Was it detected? And did it generate an alert to the SOC? And this is the idea and the use case behind this integration. The way it works is that whatever SIEM platform you're using, if you are integrated with your SIEM platform with SafeBreach, basically this integration doesn't require any additional configuration. It should be working out of the box for you, specific for Zscaler. SafeBreach will simulate attacks, and then it will query the SIEM platform for logs or for any events that are generated by Zscaler for that specific time frame, for the specific hosts which were generated the attacks. And those logs will be fetched into the SafeBreach platform, automatically correlated to the simulations that were associated with them. And this way, when you look at the simulation results, you can understand what the attack is doing, what threat it's associated with, but at the same time, see which was the logs which was generated that generated visibility, and then which were the logs which maybe reported prevention, and exactly what was the type of threat that was detected as part of the test. So couple of use cases or examples of how to utilize this integration. So first use case is around internet and cloud access configuration. So of course, I think as Kenny mentioned as well, cloud adoption, increase in security tools, multiple cloud platforms, multiple SaaS platforms are being used by organizations, multiple flavors of devices are being used by the users, and the ability to basically understand the threat perspective of what happens when a user which accesses a malicious site or tries to download a malware or tries to go somewhere on the internet which is probably not recommended, and validate that the configuration that we have of ZIA is actually what we were looking for, is around that use case. Kenny, do you want to share some specifics around that maybe?
Yeah, it's just one of these tests that I can't tell you how many times I've gone through this scenario and spent hours, if not days, trying to come to the end of understanding exactly what the thing was to prioritize or focus in on from a gap perspective, so that we could end up, increasing the efficacy of our configuration, or adding the correct IOCs, or adding other intelligence sources that we had, because that stuff in and of itself is time consuming and takes time. But just being able to get through the weeds of the information to the exact points that you needed to focus in on took hours. And then doing an integration like this makes it seamless. It's one of the things I honestly wish I had had a lot earlier on in my career, but that is is where we're at. We're at a great evolution for those coming on board today.
There is always a little bit of a balance, right, between how much security we add in versus maintaining user experience, right? So while it's relatively easier to understand that user experience is not hindered because all you have to do is basically use a little bit or get feedback from your users, but actually understanding that you are protected is a tougher one, I guess.
It's so true. There's this continuum between business first focus or security first focus that it always has to be some balance in between.
Okay, so next example is around cloud specific access and misconfiguration. So misconfiguration can be at the access level, where typically complex cloud architectures involve many types of applications, many types of services that are provisioned to many types of users. And given that those credentials for those users are leaked, or the device that those users are using is owned in some way, that could open up basically many opportunities for an attacker. And so ZIA, I believe, provides a granular protection around that, and the ability to basically very easily validate against the cloud-specific access threats and different configurations of different devices with ZIA configured on them is another example of the use case here.
Yeah, 100%. It's interesting because CNAP and the evolution with the workload segmentation capability and configuration implementation for multi-cloud has come so far. It's still huge and kind of cumbersome to being able to track all of those configurations over time. And it doesn't really lend to, at least from the ones that I've been able to work with, anybody's really good at the validation portion. And so that's like exactly where I think SafeBreach and BAS comes into play.
Yeah, and it's also a moving target, right? Because things are changing so fast. So the ability to do it continuously and the ability to make sure that things are not drifting away is also key here. So I don't know, many of the CISOs I talk to tell me that even if they do a manual test, a week later, it's probably less relevant.
Oh, totally. I'll tell you, many times I've worked in a SOC where we thought we knew about every cloud that we were supposed to, and on a monthly basis, we came across a new one and then had to go through the same rigmarole of, is it been onboarded? Is it got the controls in place? Are these IAM identities being tracked correctly? Is S3 being controlled correctly? Is our security groups being limited correctly? And it's a nightmare.
Right. So to summarize, visibility into your network and cloud readiness and understanding the overall security posture and the role that each control plays within it, all in a way which is automated and doesn't require basically going through multiple tools and looking for events in multiple parts of the ecosystem and so on. The ability to optimize prevention and detection and find that right balance between user experience and business versus security, and making sure that the threats which are important are actually prevented in the environment, to enable improving alerts and making sure that the threats are detected as what they are and are detected by the policies as you expect them to. And of course, all of that is automated and doesn't require manual effort. So once the initial configuration is complete, things are running, and they can be run in continuous way, monitored, and changes can be detected very easily. So I think now it's a good time to take a look at a quick demo, which Kenny has volunteered to help us with. So.
Can you guys see my screen?
Yep.
All right. So let's start off here at the beginning in the SafeBreach console here. I really have a hard time holding back, actually, Yotam, that I'm kind of a fanboy. I know it's supposed to be like an equal partnership call where we're talking about our individual products, but I've used it so much, and it's so intuitive to me, at least in my experience, and being able to kind of quickly do the things that I've wanted it to do testing on efficacy of tooling, or kind of understanding what new threat, like you were talking about, with the CISA alerts coming out and being able to say that this is a problem, we need to have coverage for it. You know, you guys have several methods of having these either atomic or full-blown scenarios. So either atomic attacks like the 25,000+ that you have, or then put into attacks that are targeted for the ones like you were showing, based upon either a categorization of just kind of getting started in baselining, understanding the steps to what you're going through, you know, the security controls around specific technologies that are out there, or like we were talking about before with like specific CISA alerts, or things that have really bubbled up to the national, international level of threats that people should be mitigating quite quickly. But all of these are quite easily available, and I kind of just want to go in and show one real quick how easy it is that we could go in and baseline around remote workforce security, and all of these different portion of the MITRE attack tactics phase are broken down within this one scenario. And simply all I have to do is go in here and configure the simulation for the simulators I'm using in my environment. Currently mine aren't connected, but that's going to be fine for this. We'll still be able to run it. And it'll light up all of these different tactics that will be used in the scenario, and all of these different individual techniques that'll happen. And I just click it and I'll run the test. And, you know, before something like SafeBreach came along, that could have taken a team of people days to come up with the ability to do, and then actually get all of the, you know, approvals to being able to go through and do. And it just honestly just took us a few seconds. So to me, that's quite amazing. And you can see, like, there was like Yotam was saying, 25,000 different techniques and growing. But there's, you know, hundreds of scenarios that it's built into, and you can see them here as the activity is running, or you can look into the past and see its specific activities, what they were doing, their breakdown of percentage of missed and hit, or looked into each individual attack. Now I wanted to kind of throw this in here because this is the console without the integration, and Yotam's going to show what it looks like with the integration, since all we're seeing right now is missed or stopped. So maybe like a blocked or not blocked kind of scenario. The one with the integration for SafeBreach and Zscaler around your SIM is going to have a little bit more intelligence that's going to make that just even easier. Yotam, do you want me to send it over to you now?
Yes, I will just quickly share. I think I'm logged out. Let me just log in and I'll share.
No problem.
Just a couple more seconds.
No problem. It wouldn't be a great presentation without a little like demo God sacrifice.
Yeah. good to go. So
Good to go.
we do have the integration. We can see we have a lot more status options here. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, no, that's great.
So now we can see a breakdown of what was detected, what was logged, what was missed, prevented, or just stopped. And I'm now filtering for things which are prevented by the ZIA proxy. We have two quick examples. One of them is around malicious communications. It's for one of the US cert alerts, and it shows communication with a traitor malware. When I drill into the result, I see all of the details of what is the attack doing, a little bit of remediation and recommendations. I can see the exact parameters that were used, how the simulation is classified, and then a log of exactly what happened in each of the actors. But then I get to the security events tab, and here I see that we have some logs out there, but we also identify in green the logs which are associated with prevention. In this case, we see that the product is ZIA. We see that the product reported something which is called blocked reputation block outbound request by a malicious URL. So it's fair to assume that the URL we communicated to was identified as a malicious URL. And then if we want to take a look at the raw event, we can also see that here. So the event is actually here. We can copy it. We actually parse the entire event, so we can see each of the fields of the events in the table as well. But we can also copy and paste and share the entire raw event with someone if we need to. So this is the example of the malicious communications, and then we can see the malware download example where someone is surfing to a malicious site, and they are encountering some type of drive-by download of a malware. In this case, we see a few events. In this case, the policy that has stopped it is around the file type, which we try to download. So even if that specific malware might have not been identified by the file hash, the specific file type was illegal, and then it was blocked by the ZIA tool. And so a couple of examples of how it looks, but as you can see, it's very easy. It's all at my fingertips. I can understand what's going on. I can go and take those details, also search them in my SIEM platform and make sure that I'm seeing the right things.
Actually, that's a good pivot. I always want to take and show a little bit of how we can see the contexts in the ZIA in the Zscaler admin console.
That'd be great.
Can you guys see my my screen here? I'm looking at a sandbox report right now, but as Yotam was showing, like here in the individual views, you can get a context around that attack that had happened, right? And the source destination information and all of the other interesting events that you would like to being able to articulate this to teams that need to go and do some work to improve that posture, change that configuration, or remove that access so that there's not a gap there. Kind of flipping that on its head, when you look at it from the Zscaler perspective, you can get context, of course, on the who with the identity information from the client contactor or authorized users through pack file or identity authorization, such as SAML. There's also contextualizations on the overall, being able to see your environment, and you can drill down specifically into groups or users that make interesting sense. Like if we were focused in only on our SafeBreach user that we're using for testing, you could create a specific group for that and track those and look at that activity over time. Kind of from a security standpoint, like I was showing before with the sandbox report, you can get some understanding of what was the overall for today or in the last 7 days or whatever time is selected for the particular widgets. And you can see these file attributes in the sandbox report, like I was showing here, giving a lot of contextualization over the intelligences that you could potentially extrapolate and put into other informations, whether it's doing threat hunting in your SIM, using it to create customizations within the SafeBreach console for another type of attack, or simulating similar attacks, but just tweaking things a little bit, or looking through your EDR data. Yeah, I think that's about it from my side. Is it time for Q&A?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Kenny. Thank you so much, Kenny, and your time. We do have a few questions that we've received. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with those. Just a reminder to everyone that you can submit your questions live through the Q&A functionality at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and we will answer them live right now. The first question that we have here is, I believe this might be for Yotam, even Kenny can answer it. Did you state that SafeBreach simulations are created for new attacks within 24 hours of the attack being identified?
Yeah, so that's correct by SLA for US CERT threat alerts and for FBI flash alerts. Aside from that, we update our playbook with any high-profile threat in the industry. But by SLA, we commit to 24 hours for US CERT threat alerts and for FBI flash alerts.
Thank you. Next question is, how do we keep our SafeBreach alerts separate from our production report / dashboard? I can see our executives receiving their monthly Zscaler insights email and asking why there are so many more block malware activity, etc.
Yeah, so we have an identifier or a breadcrumb that we leave in every simulation, and we can share with you basically how to separate those identifiers in your platform in order to basically send it to a different sandbox or a different report or a different index if it's the same platform. But basically, we leave a way to identify SafeBreach simulations.
Yeah, it's in portions of it. It's how the integration works so well, to be honest with it, is because of those parts in there. There is other ways, like I was kind of saying, if you wanted to customize your environment, so you put these particular users that are part of that simulation group and separate them from the reports and have separate reports for them, because those KPIs are also interesting and I think should be going to management. But yes, it does kind of put a little bit noise in the haystack if you just are lumping them all together. They should be separated for kind of helping drive that KPI.
Thank you. The next question is, I believe, for Kenny. How does one minimize attack surface and eliminate the risk of unrestricted access with zero trust architecture?
It's actually a very strange question. I almost feel like it answers itself within the question, because the idea of going on the zero trust journey is about starting off with understanding your environment and starting to implement risk reduction across many things, right? So no longer giving a user just access to an environment or a network is one thing, for instance. And that's kind of one of the points of starting on to this. There's actually a huge 7-point guide, I want to say, on how to start this journey to going down zero trust that you guys can find on our website. And if we don't make it readily available with the call, I'll say looking up 7 risks or 7 elements of zero trust, you should be able to pop that up in Google and Zscaler, and it should come right to the recommendations there. But that's honestly the place to start, is looking through that guide and seeing how to put yourself on that journey.
Thank you, Kenny. Next thing is, how easy or difficult, or what is the general level of effort needed to configure and operationalize the integration that we just saw, the SafeBreach-ZIA integration?
Yeah, so I'll start by saying that effectively, most of our customers are working with a SIEM integration, and basically, if you have the SIEM integration, you basically get the Zscaler is reporting to the SIEM, so it is expected to work for you out of the box. But also ask Kenny, because he worked a lot with it. So maybe what's your verdict on how easy it is?
It's hard when you're the one guy wearing like 5 hats to get it running in your demo environment. To be honest with you, I'll just go ahead and say that. But like Yotam said, it is super simple if you already have an existing SIEM that's already being fed with the logs, which the majority of the customers I come across and talk to do. And typically they have a team that is running that that log correlation, or they're doing some detection engineering staffing that helps with that. Because the only other thing that you have to do, correct me if I'm wrong, on the SafeBreach side is then configure a user within the SafeBreach console, and you're off to the races. And it's doing all of that extra contextualization on the attack results.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Thank you. We have one last question here. Given that during the pandemic and later, the attack surface is now growing because a lot of people are permanently working from home, how can organizations effectively prepare and ensure that remote workers do not become security gaps for the overall organizational security?
I'll let you start this time, Kenny.
Okay. Yeah, it's a good question, because I think we're now looking at a different risk perspective, a different a way of going about assessing this, because it's no longer we're looking at the user and what they have access to within this castle, if you will, on the enterprise, or at that hub location. But I will tell you, from having worked with SafeBreach's technology, there is actually scenarios built in for that will assess those postures most associated with remote workers, and then using that to target identities or come up with identities that emulate that activity would be where I would start.
Yeah, and that scenario actually consists of the two major parts, which is the boundary and then the device. And so we've seen a mix of managed and unmanaged devices having to access different parts of the network across different boundaries. And across the pandemic, we've seen many changes, many very rapid changes, where people had to increase the capacity of their boundary in a way which they didn't before, because everyone suddenly started working from home. And so that drove a lot of changes at the boundary level. And so the ability to validate both the device level and the level of management on the device, and then also the boundary, are the two major things which are included as part of the scenario.
That's true. I think it's one of the reasons why you've seen everybody double down on identity controls and device posturing and user posturing, Zscaler included, because those are complete necessities to having that checkbox for managed versus unmanaged.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was about that was all the questions that we have received. Just want to mention this: if you are interested in getting a free ransomware assessment, we are offering that option. So if you do go to our website on SafeBreach.com, you can see a link for ransomware assessment. This is a complimentary ransomware assessment where you can go ahead and register, and our SafeBreach as a Service team will contact you and set up the assessment based on a certain set of scenarios, just to get an idea, just to give you an idea of what your exposure could be to a latest and greatest ransomwares that are out there. So please feel free to head over to our site and take a look. Additionally, I believe Kenny did mention a bunch of resources initially on the Zscaler side. So please also go to the Zscaler website and take a look at the new tool that they've launched, and any new collateral, as well as the new capabilities of the Zscaler Internet Access platform. That being said, I would like to thank each and every one of you, including our amazing presenters and all the attendees who took the time to join our webinar and ask these insightful questions. Have a wonderful rest of the morning and afternoon, everybody else. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Cheers.